Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more buckshot testing, and today we've got another very interesting combination that could literally go either way. It could give us a surprisingly decent result for what it is, or it could be an absolute flop and completely ruin whatever potential pattern we might be able to get from these shells. I don't know what we're going to see yet, but we're going to find out what happens either way. But as for the shells we're going to test today, I brought out some of the Federal Power-Shok buckshot loads, but these ones are the 20 gauge 3-inch 18 pellet load of 2 buck, moving about 1100 feet per second. There's nothing really fancy about these. They are a buffered load, but that's about it. They don't have any kind of special plating or wad or anything like that to them. We've tested these a time or two previously with some pretty disappointing results, which I'll talk more about here in a second, but who knows? They might do halfway decent through today's combination. But as for that setup, we're going to run them through. I brought out the Stevens 301 20 gauge. It's got a 26-inch barrel on it, and for the choke, I've got the factory stock extra full in here. This particular one measures out at a 588 constriction. With these Stevens, their stock chokes can be a little bit tighter or a little more open. Mine just so happens to be a touch tighter than a full choke at 588 versus something about 590 or so for a full. But for a buckshot choke, it has given us some okay patterns so far, and I think a lot of that has to do with the extended portion of it, giving these buckshot pellets a little more room to constrict down. But here's the deal. I say this every time we test 20 gauge buck, and somehow or another, it always brings people out of the woodworks into the comments that are going to argue with you one way or the other. 20 gauge buckshot in general doesn't usually pattern well. I've tried them through more open chokes, tighter chokes, turkey chokes, flush chokes, extended chokes, doesn't really matter. Most of the time, they are pretty terrible. Really, the only chokes that have given us a usable pattern have been this stock extended extra full, and I think a Primos tight wad turkey choke. But other than that, that has been it. So I have found that tighter chokes and extended chokes tend to work better, but you're still at a severe disadvantage. So we're just going to have to see how these Power-Shok loads do through this extra full choke. But as for today's test, everything is set up the same as usual. I've got the big sheet of paper at 40 yards, chronograph so we can get our velocity, and the template so we can lay up over our results. So let's get you guys a view of that target and see how well this combination works together, or if it's just another complete failure for 20 gauge buckshot. I don't know what we're going to see just yet, but let's take our shot and see what happens. Alright, so that shell gave us 1071 through the chrono. The boss claim is 1100, so we are just a touch below that claim, but still well within the realm of reason here for what they're claiming. So looking okay for velocity up here, but did they actually give us a usable pattern down there at 40? Let's go check it out and see. Alright, so now we're down here at our 40-yard paper, and I gotta say, this is a little bit of a surprise for a lot of 20 gauge buckshot loads. But the white dot was my point of aim. The paper's 36 inches wide by roughly 44 inches tall or so. We had all 18 pellets on the paper here, and a pretty decent pattern at that, to be honest with you. I did measure the overall spread of the pattern, and it is pretty much an even 27 by 27. That's up, down, left, and right there. It's pretty much a 27-inch circle if we were to draw that around there. So for overall size of the pattern, for buckshot in general, nothing too fancy or too impressive, but for a 20 gauge load, this is actually a usable combination. Now, unfortunately, it looks like we do have a little bit of a void right in the middle of our pattern there, right around the top part of that white dot. We might have one or two flyers in this pattern, maybe that one up there at the top. We definitely have one over here at the right, and maybe that one down there at the bottom too, but they're not completely gone all over the place or too wild necessarily, and that's not too surprising, all things considered. But this is one of the 2, maybe 3 decent 20 gauge buckshot patterns we've gotten, so it kind of seems like maybe the extra full choke range between the 585 and 590 might be the ticket, especially if you've got an extended choke. But let's throw a few templates up and get a little better reference as compared to just the blank sheet of paper. So first up here is our 10-inch circle, and since our pattern did favor just a touch to the left, I did favor the template over there as well, and we had 3 pellets in a 10-inch circle at 40 yards. Definitely nothing impressive as far as a core goes. You can definitely see up towards the top right area of that 10-inch circle, that void that I was talking about. If we had a couple of these other pellets within there, we would probably have about 5 inside of that 10-inch circle, which is about average for a halfway decent buckshot load. So it does have a little bit of a hole in the core, but But let's throw an actual animal template up and see how it would look in a hunting scenario, because that might give us a little better reference as to how it actually looks. So here's our deer template, and when we line it up roughly with our point of aim there, we would have had a good majority of the load that would have hit this deer. You can definitely still see that void though, right through the lung area there, but you still would have had several that probably got into the heart, and a bunch more through the spine, back there through the liver area, and one up through the shoulder there as well, just in front of the lungs. So would that have been a dead deer? Yeah, it definitely would have been. I think it would look a little better if we didn't have that void in the middle of the pattern, but either way, this is something that we can't normally say with most 20 gauge buck combinations. That yes, this would be a usable enough hunting combination for a deer hunt. It still wouldn't be my first choice. I would just use a good performing 12 gauge double aught load or something like that. But let's throw the hog template up and see how that one looks. And here's that hog template. Still that super noticeable void at the top part of that white dot, right through where your lungs would be. That's a little unfortunate, but you would have covered him in a good amount of pellets across most of his body there. So yep, it would be good enough. And for those of you predator hunters out there as well, a coyote would be just a touch smaller than what this hog template is. So it would be good enough for that scenario as well. So overall, I think this is pretty decent for a 20 gauge buckshot pattern. It's at least usable, which is not something we can typically say from a lot of 20 gauge buckshot combos. If we can tighten that down just a tiny little bit more and get rid of that big void in the middle, that would be a pretty decent little hunting combo. Alright y'all, well, what did you think about that performance right there? I think we pretty well covered it here. That's an okay performance, especially for 20 gauge loads. For a 12 gauge, that would be pretty mediocre, but for a 20 gauge, considering the struggles that we've had with them, that's not bad. It's actually a usable combination. So at least we know now that we have a shell that has a little bit of a potential to perform decently, so I definitely think it's worth trying them through a few different chokes, a few different constrictions, maybe a touch tighter. If we can get that in just a little bit tighter overall, then I think that would be a perfectly usable combo. So leave all your thoughts down below. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of the 20 gauge Power-Shok buckshot loads? And if so, what kind of results have you seen? Is that a pattern or a combo that you would ever hunt with? And what other shells or choke combos do you want to see with 20 gauge buck in general, or that stock extra full choke, or whatever the case would be? Let me know all that down below. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we have the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.